So today we'll be learning about the rest of the two values for this position property. First one is absolute and the second one is relative. First we'll talk about position absolute. For that we'll create a new div element. Let's create div, and in here we'll write absolute div. Save this. Okay, now this div element is present on this web page, but we cannot see it because this div element is covered by div2 element. Let's see that. If we scroll down our page, here we go. Let's give this div element some inline styles. First, let's give this a background color. Let's set this to, let's say, light green. Save this. Okay, now we have this div element with the background color of light green. Now let's set its position property to absolute. So we'll write position absolute. Save this. Now you will see this position absolute is over this div2 element. Although it is scrolling with the page, but it is covering the div2 element. Usually when we set any div's position value to fixed, we want that element to appear on top of every other element. But here this absolute div is appearing on top of our div2 element. Now we can fix that issue with the special CSS property z index. Now let's set this value to 1. Now save this. There we go. Now we can see this div element is appearing on top of our absolute div. Now the default value for z index is 0 for all elements. Currently even this div element has a z index value of 0. So this z index value determines which element will go over another element. At this point, this absolute div has a z index of 0, but this div element has a z index of 1. That's why this element is appearing on top of this absolute div element. Now if we change the z index value for this element, let's say z index 2, then now again this absolute element will appear on top of this div2 element. Save this. There we go. So usually if we want something to appearing on top of everything on the page, and we set a very high value, let's say 100 z index, so that we can have room for another z index values. Let's save this. Fine. Now let's remove this value. Okay, now let's talk about this absolute div element. For this absolute div element, just like this position fixed, here also we can give this some top value 0 pixels. Save this. It will stick to the top of the page. Also, let's say some height value of 40 pixels. There we go. So just like this position fixed element, we can even give precise position to this absolute div element. Generally we do not use this absolute div element like this. Usually we put this element inside some another element, mostly some fixed kind of element, like this div2 element. This is a fixed position element. Inside this, if we will put this absolute div element, then it will stick to this div2 element, and as we scroll down the page, this element won't move like this static element. So let's do one thing. Let's cut this div element from here and paste it inside div2 element. So here after div2, we'll paste this code. Perfect. Now save this. There we go. Now we have this absolute div element inside this fixed div element. Here if we scroll down the page, this element this time will not scroll. Okay, now you will see these properties that we have provided here. Top and right property is now relative to this div element. which means top 0 pixel means stick to the top of this element and not to the top of this page, unlike earlier. And this right 40 pixel is 40 pixels from the right of this element. You might have seen some pop-ups which appear on top of your page. Those pop-up have a cross button on top right, just like this page has a cross button on this corner. Let's convert this absolute div element into a cross button for this div element. We need to just change the position of this element. So we'll write right 0 pixel also. Save this there. Now let's change this text from absolute div to a cross. Save this. Let's also change the background color to red and change the text color to white. This is the use case of absolute div element. Now let's say you want this cross button on div 1 element also. What you can do is you can copy this code from here and paste it inside div 1 element. Okay, now save this. Okay, now you see this time this thing did not work. This cross, instead of being on the top right corner of this element, it appeared on the top right corner of this entire page right here. See if you can see this clearly. This is happening because this element is not a fixed element and this is not designed to have a absolute element which will stick to this element. So to have this cross element on the top right corner of this div element, what we can do is we can change here the position value of this div element from static to relative. Now this div element position value is not static and it is relative. This time this cross element will appear on the top right corner of this div element. Save this. There we go. And also if we scroll down, this cross sticks to this element. These are the use case of position absolute and position relative. And you also might have seen some of the cross button which are circular in shape and they are a little bit out of this box. So let's create that circular kind of cross button for this ribbon element. So here first of all we'll give this some padding. Let's say 4 pixels. Let's do one thing. First value let's give this 2 pixel and second value give this 4 pixel. Now it looks kind of like a square. And also change this text to a capital X and change the font family also to Arial and also add border radius. First border none and then border radius to a very big value, let's say 40 pixels. Okay, now we need to decrease the height. So let's give this a 0 pixel. Okay, now it looks perfectly round. Now to move this out of this div element, we have already given the 0 value. Now to make this element go beyond 0, we can give this a negative value. Let's say negative 4 pixel. There we go. And for right also, we can give this negative 4 pixel. Let's make this to negative 5. There you go. That's all for CSS position from my side.